Hello everyone, welcome to Come Sit at My Table. I'm going to do something today that I have promised you for a long time that I was going to do. Every time we have made a pie, I have said I'm using a store-bought pie crust, but I promise you I'm going to show you how to make a pie crust. And then, the next time we're doing a pie, I'm in a hurry and I just haven't taken the time. So today, we are going to make a homemade pie crust. And I'm going to tell you, a homemade pie crust is not hard to do. It does take a little time. It takes longer than getting a store-bought crust out of the refrigerator and putting it in your pie pan, but it's not hard to do. It's actually very simple, so don't be intimidated by it. It takes very few ingredients. It's very, very simple ingredients. I'm sure you probably have everything at home that you need to make a pie crust right now. So don't be intimidated by it. I'm going to show you how to do it today, and I think you'll be surprised how easy it is if you've never done one. Now, if you've made a pie crust before, you know that it's pretty simple and pretty easy to do. But if you've not made one, don't be intimidated by it. It's easy. Let's talk about what we're going to use. We're going to start with all-purpose flour, and I've already put some flour in my half cup and quarter cup. I have not filled the 1 cup. But we're going to use 1 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. So that's a 1 cup, a half cup, and a 1/4 cup. And we do not pack those in, which is the reason I have not filled this one yet. I wanted to do it with you to show you that it should not be scooped out of your flour bin. You should spoon it in and then gently level it off, and we'll do that in a minute. We're also going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar. We're going to use 5 tablespoons of butter, and I have cubed that up. You can see that I've just cut it into small cubes, almost the size of like a sugar cube. We don't see sugar cubes anymore like we used to when I was a kid. And we're also doing the same thing with 5 tablespoons of Crisco. So 5 tablespoons of butter, 5 tablespoons of Crisco. Now, Crisco is notoriously soft. You can put it in the refrigerator and leave it in there for 10 years, and when you take it out, it's still going to be soft. But we need it to be a little firmer to cut into the flour. So I always stick my Crisco in the freezer for 5 minutes, 10 minutes before I use it. So stay right there. I just had to stick that in the freezer because I want it to be good and firm. I've already had it in the freezer for a few minutes. I took it out to show you, but we're going to leave it in there until we're ready to use it. The last thing we're going to need is about 4 to 5 tablespoons of ice water. And yes, I do have ice in there because you need it to be ice cold. The colder the water, the better your pie crust is going to do because it will keep that butter and that Crisco firm, won't allow it to melt and just become a big glob. Is that a technical word?
That sounds very sophisticated.
Okay, so I guarantee you probably have flour, salt, sugar, butter. You probably have some Crisco, and you know you've got ice water. So that's all you need to make pie crust. Now, this is how we do our flour for a pie crust. We just spoon it in. Oh, I'm backhanded again, aren't I?
It's okay.
Sorry. So I just pile it up all the way around, and then I just take my scoop and level it off gently. I don't press down on it. I just go straight across and level it off. Then we put that right into our bowl. Thank you, babe. Get that out of my way. Push those down there too. We're going to add our 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And we're going to sprinkle in our 1 tablespoon of sugar. Now that's pretty simple. Then we're just going to kind of mix that up. This is kind of like whisking. You can use a pastry cutter or a fork or a whisk if you want to use your whisk, but I'm going to use this pastry cutter to cut my butter and Crisco in anyway, so thought why not use it and keep from dirtying something else. Now, we're going to put in our butter, and I really don't want it to go in a glob, so I kind of just drop it into the flour because I want each one of those pieces of flour to be kind of coated. If 2 or 3 of them stick together, it's not going to hurt anything, but you don't want to just throw them in as a big glob of butter. I've used that word a lot in this video, haven't I?
High-tech stuff here.
Yeah, I know. Now, I need to grab my Crisco, and we're going to do the same thing. We'll just kind of drop it in there one piece at a time, and yeah, even though it's been in the freezer for about 5 minutes, it's still pretty soft. But that's okay. That's the best we can do. Now, if you are against using Crisco, if you just don't like using shortening, then just use 10 tablespoons of butter. It's not going to hurt anything. It'll be fine. I've done that many times, especially if I was out of Crisco. So don't worry about using that. Okay. Get me a paper towel here and get the Crisco off my fingers. Now, we're just going to cut that butter and Crisco into our flour. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you can do this with 2 knives. You would just take 2 knives and put in your butter and flour and just cross them. Just cut it right in like that. But if you have a pastry cutter, this makes short work of it. Now, if you don't like, well, I just splashed some out. If you don't like doing it with knives and you don't have a pastry cutter, you can do it with your fingers. Just go in with your hand and push that butter, grab a piece of it, and just kind of push it into small pieces like that and put it right back in. Just do it in the flour like that. You can see I'm just doing it right down in that flour where it coats. But I'm going to tell you, a pastry cutter makes it so much easier if you don't throw it all over your counter. Now, you don't want to do this to the point that you don't see the butter and the Crisco. You definitely want to be able to see chunks in there. That's going to help your pie crust be flaky, and you want to make sure you still see some of that in there. So it should be like, I don't know, like little pebbles in your flour. So just cut it in. If you see any huge pieces and you can't get them cut up with your pastry cutter, go and do it with your fingers. Okay, I think that's pretty good right there. I'm going to clean off my pastry cutter. We want all that off there, because we want all that butter and Crisco and flour in our pie dough. All right. Now, you can see there's a piece of butter. And that's okay, but it won't hurt if I just mash that in half. So I'm just going to look through it to make sure there are none that are just huge that I missed. And I think that looks pretty good. All right, now we're going to start with 4 tablespoons of ice water. So there's 1, and I'm just kind of dribbling it in. 2, 3, and 4. And normally that will do it. Sometimes you may need 1 more. Now I like to switch to a fork at this point and start stirring and just get all that worked in together. You'll see that it starts to look a little damp. It's not going to be wet. It's not going to come together like a bread dough. And you know what? Now that I've done that, it looks like I haven't worked my butter in enough. So I'm just going to use my fork to work that in some. And that will get my water and flour kind of incorporated too. Now that it was wet, I could see that butter a little better. Okay. Now, we just want to make sure that we've stirred all that flour in and that it's hydrated well. All right. This is what's called a shaggy dough. It's not like a bread dough that is smooth and elastic and really pretty. It's kind of dry looking, but just by putting my hands in it, I can tell that it's damp. It's not wet, but it is damp. So I think that's probably enough water. If we start working it and it's not, if it's too dry to come together as a dough, then I'll put some more in it. I can do that right on my mat. Okay, so now we need to put out our pastry mat. You say, well, I don't have a pastry mat. What do I do? Well, put out a piece of parchment paper. That will work too. And if you don't have that, you can do it directly on your counter. It's fine to do that. It's just that I feel like a pastry mat keeps it from sticking, or a piece of parchment paper keeps it from sticking. So that's why I like to put something down. But if you don't have it, it's fine. You can do it right on your counter. There's a big piece of butter right there. I need to break up a little bit. Now, this looks like a mess. But when we start pressing, you can see it's going to start to come into a dough. And we just need to keep pressing and kneading. Yes, you're going to see pieces of butter in there. I don't know if you can see that, Melissa.
Yes.
I hope that shows up on camera. You can see pieces of butter in that dough. That's what you want. If you can't see the butter, you've probably overworked it a little bit too much. So I just take my hands and go under it and press in. Now, if it's not sticking together, then you know it's too dry and you probably need to add another tablespoon of water. But that's going to be up to you. Once I feel like it's kind of coming together, I make a disc out of it. You can do this with your hands, or you can roll it out with a rolling pin. That's up to you. But I just make a fairly thick disc. Then I'm going to fold it on top of itself. Now it's probably going to crack. It's probably not going to stay together. See there? See that? But look at those layers in there. And that's why we're folding it. As we do that, we're creating layers in our pie dough. So I'm going to push it out again. Just using the heel of my hand, pushing it out. And I'm going to fold it a second time. Look how shaggy this is. See there? It's kind of crumbling. That's okay. And I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to press it out. And I'm going to fold it one last time. Now we're ready to form it into our disc and get it ready to go in the refrigerator to rest. While it's in the refrigerator resting, something happens between the dough and the butter and that water. The flour. What did I say?
The dough.
The flour, the butter, and the water. Thank you, babe. You keep me straight. Something happens and it becomes hydrated. That flour just, I don't know, something happens to it, and this becomes a really nice, cohesive disc of dough. So you can see now, I've kind of pressed it out. It's kind of sort of in a round disc. It doesn't have to be perfectly round, but you want it to be in a disc. And remember, we've created those layers in there. So now I'm going to grab a piece of plastic wrap and we will get this wrapped up. So let me grab a piece of plastic wrap. Okay, we have our plastic wrap down. I'm just going to take a bench scraper and make sure that I get all of this. So I'm just going to scrape all those little bits of crumbs right up here. And then I'm going under my dough. And I'm going to move that right over to the plastic wrap. And anything that falls off, I can just take and put right over here beside of it. And we'll just push it back together It will be fine. And then I'm just going to take my plastic wrap and wrap it real tight. You want it wrapped up really nice and snug. And then we're going to put this in the refrigerator for at least an hour. An hour is usually long enough, but you want it to have time to rest. You want that flour to hydrate, and you want it to firm up a little bit. Now, when we take it out, it's not going to be ready to roll out. It has to rest for a few minutes on the counter or on your pastry mat before you can roll it out. So we're going to put it in the refrigerator. When it's cold, we'll take it out, let it rest, and then we'll roll out our pie crust. Our pie dough has been in the refrigerator for actually about 3 hours because Melissa and I got busy. And I have taken it out and let it sit here for a little over 10 minutes, maybe closer to 15. So we're just going to unwrap it. I'm going to put some flour on my pastry mat. If you don't have a pastry mat, again, now you can use a piece of parchment paper. You can, I guess, use plastic wrap. I've never done that, but I don't know why you couldn't. But really, you need something down better, more than just on your counter. Then we'll put our dough on here, and we need to dust it on the top just a little bit to keep it from sticking. And we need to dust our rolling pin. And now we're just going to roll it out. I like to start in the middle and work my way out. And after I roll it a couple times, I like to turn it and roll the other direction. Now you may see some cracks form in the dough, especially around the edges. And if you do, that's okay. We're just going to push those back together. Does not hurt a thing. A lot of times you won't get any cracks, but sometimes you will. So if that happens, don't get upset. It's just part of it. And we just need to roll it both directions. We want to try to keep it as much of a circle as we can.
Now, this isn't really all that difficult, but it does take more time than if you just purchased one, of course. But
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about my grandmother right now.
Oh my.
My grandparents had a restaurant.
Yes, they did.
She made pies for the restaurant. It was back in the day when you could make pies in your home and sell them in a business. But she made her pie crust too. She made like, I don't know, 50, 75 pies a day.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine.
I remember hearing your dad talk about that. She would make pies and stack the pie crust in the pie plate, stack the pie plates up at night, refrigerate those in stacks, and then take them out the next morning, make her filling, and fill those pie crust before taking them in her car to the store.
I think my grandfather came and did all that. I don't think
Did he?
Yeah, she didn't drive, but
Okay.
I can't fathom making 5 a day, let alone 50 or 75 a
Yeah,
day.
me either. I can't imagine doing that. I'm going to put a little more flour down because it's wanting to stick. So let's just put a little down here. Move it back over. Move it around some. And we'll keep going. I need this crust to be about 12 inches. And I'm getting close right here. Okay, now you can see I've got a crack right there. I'm just going to push that together. I'm just going to try to bandage it up. All right, now we have our pie plate, and I'm just going to move our crust, if I can keep it from breaking, into our pie plate. And we don't ever want to force it down in. You want to raise the edges and just let it lower into the bottom of the crust. Just like that. Then we'll come back, make sure that everything's down in there and it's covered well. And then we can do whatever we want to the edges. Now there's a lot of different ways you can do the edge of a pie crust. You can fold the extra under and flute it with your fingers or crimp it with your fingers. You can use a fork. There's just a lot of different ways you can do it.
But you're not going to pierce with it.
I'm not. So this is my favorite. I just take, actually my knuckles usually work better. I just take my fingers and use my knuckle and I just push in like that. Sometimes if I'm in a hurry, I just use my fingers like this, but really, if I can keep my hands out of the way. Now I'm going to take this part of the crust and I'm going to tear just a little bit of that off because that's a little more than I need there. And I'm just going to crimp that dough all the way around, just like that. Now, here again, I've got a little more than I need, so I'm just going to remove a little bit of it. But then I'll just take my knuckle. Now, here's the good thing. When you get to this point, this is ready to bake with your, speaking of, this is ready to bake if you're going to do a baked pie. Something like a blueberry pie or an apple pie. Something, a pumpkin pie, where you're going to bake the pie filling and the crust. This is ready to fill. You can do it right now. But you may be doing a pie that you have to blind bake the crust before you can fill it. Something like a strawberry pie, where you would bake the crust and then fill it with whatever filling. If that's what you're doing, then you need to blind bake this crust. And we are going to do that with this just to show you what to do. But, you know, that's determined by what pie you're going to make. So you have to know whether your pie crust needs to bake with your pie or if it needs to be blind baked. All right. So there's our pie crust. If you are doing something like an apple pie, you can put your filling, well, you need to refrigerate this for, I'm going to say at least 10 minutes, 10 to 30 minutes. Let that butter that's in there firm up so it doesn't just melt into a puddle in the oven. But while this needs to go in the refrigerator while you're getting your filling ready. However, if you're going to blind bake it and you're going to do something like a strawberry pie, then I'm going to show you what you need to do. So we have our pie crust ready. I got some dough on the bottom of my pan. I'm just going to get this out of the way, Melissa. I'm going to pull it down here out of the way. Okay. Now, we need to go into the oven and let this pie crust bake before we can fill it if we're going to do something like strawberry pie. So what we do is we line it with a piece of parchment paper. And I'm going to tell you, these two pieces of parchment paper have been used for, I don't know how many years. Years and years and years. I just keep the same one. I just cut out a rough circle. It fits right down inside. And I've got two because this circle fits a regular pie. This one fits a deep dish. So I just put it right down inside my pie crust. And I fill that full of dry beans. Now, you may need all of them, you may not, because, you know, this is not a deep dish crust, so I may not need all those. but you're just going to fill that full. Okay, what's the reason for this? Why would you put a piece of parchment paper and beans? If you don't have beans, you can use pie weights. You can buy those, but a bag of beans is really cheap and it works just as well. If you don't use something to weight down your crust, as it bakes, that crust is going to want to shrink. And you'll end up with a crust that's a lot smaller than your pie plate. Also, if there's not something weighting it down, the bottom of it tends to bubble up. And you don't want a big bubble in the bottom of your pie crust. So you want to weight it down with something. I think a bag of beans is the best. And I have used these beans dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So after you bake your pie crust, don't get rid of the beans. Put them out on your counter, let them cool completely. You want them to be completely cooled. I usually leave them overnight. And then just bag them up. Put your parchment paper in with them. You'll have it ready the next time. Now, I'm also going to cover the edge of my crust with a pie shield. If you don't have a pie shield, actually I need to fold this down just a little. If you don't have a pie shield, you can just use a piece of aluminum foil. But just cover it up like that. Because if you don't, the edge of your crust tends to bake faster and you'll end up with burnt crust around the edge. So our oven is preheated to 425 degrees. We're going to bake this for 15 minutes. At the end of 15 minutes, we're going to take it out, remove the beans and the parchment paper. We're going to brush it with a beaten egg and about a tablespoon of milk. Brush the whole thing. Put it back in without the parchment paper and beans and bake it another 10 to 20 minutes. We'll just have to keep our eye on it and watch to make sure it doesn't overbake, but we'll continue to bake it just to get it to a nice golden brown color. So in we go. All right, our 15 minutes are up. And now it's time to remove the beans and the parchment paper. And I'm just going to move those beans over to this baking dish where they can cool. And I'll probably just leave them for the next 24 hours. Now, you can see our pie crust there. And we're going to put it, no, we're not. We've got to brush it with an egg white, or with an egg wash. So, let me grab an egg. And a fork, and about a tablespoon of milk. Just need a little bit of milk in it. And we'll just whip that up. I should have already had that done, but I forgot.
We had a small minor problem in the middle.
Yeah, while the pie crust was baking, I broke a tea pitcher. We had a tea pitcher that we've had, I guess, since we got married. I think you had it when we got married. And I dropped it and broke it.
Those things happen. Just a tea pitcher. We can replace it.
Yeah, but it's an important tea pitcher.
Okay, if you say so.
That tea pitcher has been around a long time. All right, so I'm just going to take the egg and brush it all over this crust. Now, why would we do this? Well, there are two reasons. One, it helps to seal the crust. It kind of puts a barrier between the crust and whatever filling you are putting in. So if you're putting in something that's really liquidy, really wet, this will bake on there and kind of form a barrier to keep that from soaking into your crust and making it soggy. The other thing is, it helps it to brown really nicely. So, two reasons to put an egg wash on your crust. I tend not to put the egg wash all the way up against the top, up onto the edges, because that's going to get brown anyway. So I tend to go up the side, but not around the edges. All right, let's get it back into the oven. We'll do 10 more minutes. We'll kind of watch
Do you
it.
want the shield?
Yes, definitely have to put the shield on it. We'll go in for 10 minutes and then we'll start watching it. And we may go as long as 20 total, but at least 10 more. Our pie crust is out of the oven. I am not as happy with it as Melissa is because it shrunk just a little bit right there on one side. That just bothers me. You can see here, you can see the edge of the pie plate. But overall, it looks really good. Melissa said, if I had made it, I'd be thrilled with it.
I would
But it's a really nice pie shell. I want you to show something else, Melissa. I'll try to do this without breaking the shell. Look how it just spins in the plate. It's such a nice crust because that butter and that Crisco really help it not to stick to the plate. And I did lightly spray it and then wipe it out just so there was a very thin layer of nonstick spray on it. But the butter and the Crisco in it really do help it. Let me remind you, you don't have to use the Crisco. You can use all butter and just replace the 5 tablespoons of Crisco with 5 more tablespoons of butter. All right, obviously there won't be a taste test on this one because I haven't filled the pie shell yet. I don't even know what we're going to make, but we will make a pie with it. We do appreciate you watching our videos. Right below this video, there's a thumbs up button for you to click just to say you liked our video. That helps us. There's also a share button if you'll click it and share to your own social media. That helps us get the word out about our channel. And if you haven't, we would appreciate you clicking that subscribe button, the little notification bell, and the word all. That just gives you a seat at our table. YouTube will notify you every time we add a new video. Remember that right under the video in the description box, if you'll click inside that box where the title of this recipe is, that box will expand. Melissa always puts the written recipe right there for you, and our contact information is under that recipe. And then, of course, there's a place for you to leave a comment, and we do really enjoy reading your comments. So feel free to go down there and just leave us a little comment. We'd appreciate hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching. Don't be afraid to try your own pie crust. It's not hard. You saw how easy it was. So don't be afraid to do that. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, you are always welcome to come sit at my table. Have a great day.